In this video, I'm going to talk about why I don't use the Alpine image for my node.js applications in production. And a lot of people do use Alpine, and that kind of makes sense for them because it's a very small image. It's like 40 meg in size, and when you look at the official Docker Hub image, it's like 700 meg. It's a really big image. In fact, if I look at my screen just now, what I'm going to do is build a very, very simple hello world node.js application. So literally all it's going to do is return hello world, listening on port, whatever. And what we're going to do with that application is we are going to build this with the official Docker Hub image. So if you look at this, we start from Node. So here's my Docker file from Node, and I'm pulling version 14.15.3. The reason I'm pulling that version is I want to pull the long-term support version of Node.js. I could, of course, pull one of the later builds, version 15, or one of the nightly builds. But when you're building production applications, you really want to make sure that you have supported versions and that they're going to be regularly patched. So it's always best to kind of work with the long-term support version, unless you've got a particular reason to need a later version. So that's why I'm using that. The second thing that I'm doing here, and we'll talk about this in another video, is I'm obviously not using the latest. I'm being very specific on my versions. What we're going to do is set our working directory to /app, which is where I'm going to copy the source of my application into that folder so that I can run that on Docker. And that's going to copy that from my local machine and copy those files into the image for my container. And then once that's done, I'm going to run npm install. This, just so everybody is aware, this is not a production setup. If I was going to build this for production, then I would copy the package.json across first. I would install my dependencies and etc. I'm not going to do that just now because this is all about using the base images. But we'll do a future video on how to get a proper production sort of node application built. And then finally, the last thing I'm going to do is start my server. So that's our Docker file. And if I want to build that, if I go to my terminal, all I'm going to do is I'm going to build my local file, which is this is the directory that I've got my Docker file in for this. And then I'm going to tag it quay.io, blah, blah, blah. And I'm tagging it node 14.15.3 experimental. So I'm just going to run a Docker build. It should be fairly quick because I've built this many times before, so it should actually just send some context there, and off it go. Okay, so you can see that it's now built the application. And if I were to do a Docker images on this, and we scroll to the top, you will see that at the top of the application, you see quay.io, Chris Hay UK, hello node with 1415 experimental. And you can see it's got this huge size of 952 megabytes. And this is why people get really attracted to the Alpine image, because the thought of, I've got this really, really simple node application, but the thought of actually deploying a near enough a 1 gig image is kind of, yeah, it's a little bit big for people's liking. So people tend to look for a smaller image. Now that I've got my application, let's push it up to my image registry so that I can see what the size of that file will be compressed. Of course, I'm looking at the uncompressed size, 952 meg on my local machine. When it gets pushed up to the image registry, it's going to be much lower because it's going to be compressed. But even then, it's still going to be a huge image. So I'm just going to take that very image that we pushed, and then send it up to my image registry on Quay. We just give that a second, and then that should build. So it's now built. And if we were to go into my browser, so I'll bring up Chrome for a second. You see I've got a repository called Hello Node. Let's click on that. And we're just going to click on tags here. And you can see here's the version 14.15.3 experimental, which was built a few seconds ago. And the size is 347.2 meg, which is an absolute huge image. As I said, people are very attracted to the Alpine image because it's much smaller. I don't like it, as I said, but let's actually do a comparison. So if I was to rather than pull node 1415, if I just do a dash Alpine, what that's going to do is give me the Alpine version of that image. So everything else is the same. My application, same application before. I'm just changing this to the Alpine image. And you can see why. And we'll just build this on my local machine. So this should take a few seconds. As you see, my application is now built. And if I were to type in Docker images on my machine, then we should see the size of the Alpine image. And if we go to the top there, you can kind of see, there you go, hello node, tag 14.15.3 experimental. And you can see that that's sort of claiming that's 126 megabyte application. That's uncompressed. And then if I were to push that out to Quay for a second, that will just push the new image that I've created, and then we can look at what that size of that image is going to be compressed. Again, this will take a few seconds. Now I'm going to open up Quay. We'll just hit refresh. As you can see before, the size of the image was 347 meg. We'll just hit refresh for a second. And now if we look at the screen there, you can see that previously a 347 meg image is now 41 meg. So that's a huge difference, and that's why Alpine is really attractive to people. And I get it. I understand why that's attractive, but I'm not going to run that in my production images. As we saw, the Alpine image is pretty attractive. It's small. We managed to bring the image size down from 380 odd meg to about 40 meg. And as you can see on my screen there, there's no vulnerabilities. Whereas if I were to look at, here's one I did earlier for the official image, where if you look at 14.15.3, which is our old image at 346 meg, you can see it's got 686 vulnerabilities and 3 of them highs. Why wouldn't we use that over the official nodejs image from Docker Hub? Well, before we get too excited, the first thing we really want to understand is actually how these images are built and how they're behave. So I'm gonna put together a model, so an architectural model of what we're looking for in our applications, and then we will look at how that sort of compares both for the official Node.js image and for the Alpine image. So let's draw it out. So we've got a base operating system. And then, so in Linux worlds, that could be things like Debian, it could be Red Hat, it could be Fedora, it could be CentOS, it could be Ubuntu, it could be anything really. In the Alpine image, it's obviously Alpine. In the official Node.js image, it's Debian, and it's specifically Debian version 9, and we'll look at that in a second. So you've got the base operating system, and that's everything that you need to run the OS. And that typically has your kernel, has any package managers, and it has any sort of libraries you need. So the next part that I think is really important is the application runtime. Or you could call it platform. So, in this particular case, Node.js is going to be our application runtime, everything that we need to run that. And then the final piece is going to be the application itself, and that's the Node.js application that we just created. So that's our sort of basic model. And then for that to be supported, there's obviously any packages or tools that sit between the base operating system and what your application kind of may need, or your application runtime may need to build. And then in between the application runtime and the app is any packages that the app itself may need. So we'll just say app packages. And then if we sort of build that, sort of push that together, then that really forms what our Docker image actually is. Now that we've got that model, if we take conceptually the official Node.js image, then what we would expect to see at the bottom is our Debian operating system. And then on top of that, we would expect to see our installation of node.js, and there may be a set of packages and tools in between, and then above that is going to be our hello node and any packages and tools that we need to support that. And there's not going to be very much because, you know, hello node is a very basic application. So that is what we would expect our hello node to look like. And if I was to go to the Alpine edition, so Alpine itself is a base operating system, so we should be able to just write Alpine OS there. So we're going to do that. And then any packages and tools that Alpine needs. And then we're going to have our node.js. And then we're going to have our hello node sitting here. And this would be our hello node Alpine. Okay, so that's our sort of conceptual model. So this is official, and this is Alpine. Now, if we think about this logically for a second, the size of our hello node app doesn't change. Yeah, it's the same app that is running between the two applications. So, okay, that's fine. So there's not really much optimization there. So if we look at the difference between the 700 or 300 meg and the 50 meg or whatever it was, you know, this and this are going to be roughly the same. There is going to be negligible difference. Same. Now Node.js application runtime, they're different base operating systems, so they're going to be built differently. But again, we would expect that to be a negligible difference. Yeah. And we're going to ignore the application packages and runtimes in between. It'd be negligible, right? So you're downloading Node.js, you're pushing that together. And then, so therefore, the real difference here is going to be Debian OS and Alpine OS, right? And we'd expect there to be a massive difference, right? 300 odd meg feels like a large difference, but you know, that's kind of where it is. So what I want to do is look at the differences between the Alpine image and the official Docker image. And I can do that by just clicking on the manifest file in Quay, and then it's going to give me and show me every layer that's in that image. So if we look at the very bottom of that image here, you'll see file C3 and that is the base operating system. And if I were just to if I were actually just to Google this, so let me just kill this piece here. You can see C3 whatever, and you can see actually what it's pulling is Debian stretch. So there we go. So Debian stretch edition, and it's specifically picking the sort of 9th of December build of Debian stretch. So once I've got that as my base operating system, so it's Debian stretch that's sitting at the bottom, and then I've got a whole bunch of package management, tool building, etc. So in these cases, you can see it's doing, it's getting updates on apt, it's installing Mercurial, it's installing Git, it's got OpenSSH, it's got Subversion, and then actually if I look here, it's also installing ImageMagick, it's installing readline, SQLite, it's unzip, it's installing a whole load of stuff that you could argue that we sort of don't need, but we'll get to that in a second. And then the next thing that it's doing is downloading Node.js itself. So it's going off to Node.js distro here, it's downloading that specific version, and it's doing the install. And then we're also downloading Yarn there as well. And then eventually at the top here is my application. So if I come back to this model that I'm sort of running, you can kind of see this is Debian stretch. This is my Node.js runtime that's been downloaded. And then I've got my hello node application. Very cool. But I've got a lot of packages that are being installed here and a lot of packages that are being installed here. So is that what's making the image big? Well, we'll find out in a second. So if I go to the Alpine image, and let's look at that for a second. So if we click on the Alpine manifest, let's click on that. Scroll down to the bottom. So here it's downloading the Alpine image, and then there's no package management in between, right? So in the previous version that I had, it was installing things like ImageMagick, it was installing Unzip and Mercurial and Git and all of these sort of things. None of that's happening in this version, in the Alpine version, right? It's really kind of cleaned down. And then I'm installing Node, and it's pulling it from the same location. Now, there's a few differences, and we'll come back to that in a second. But there's a few differences on how the build is done, and then it installs Yarn, and then it installs my application. Let's take a look at the container image model for the Hello Node with the official Node.js version. And what I've done in this case is I've drawn out all the packages and that are actually used to power the application runtime. So you can see, we went through this earlier in the manifest, but spelling this out, you can see a huge amount of packages as we sort of went through before. And this is how this compares to the Alpine image. So the Alpine image is really a much smaller set. So you can see libc standard C, you can see make, you can see Python 3, you can see GCC. And actually, it's really interesting to bring it into this model, because we see two fundamental differences between the container image models. Number one is the Alpine image has a much smaller set of packages as we'd expect from the official Node.js version. And those packages, as we've already can gather from the official Node.js version, is actually contributing to the large size. But the second thing that becomes really interesting is that the Alpine image is actually installing tools such as make, and the major reason that it's pulling those tools is and G++ and GCC, and the major reason it's pulling those tools is, unlike the official Node.js version, it has to compile from source. Not only is it downloading the source code and doing a compile, it's actually taking an unofficial build. If you were to look at the Node.js website, you would see that Alpine image isn't actually one of the supported platforms. So you can see at this top here, so we're at github.com, Node.js node, and on the building, and then you can see 4 production applications run Node.js on supported platforms only. And if we look at that, it's really kind of clear. Tier 1 support is glibc kernel's got to be over 3.1, glibc's got to be over 2.17, and it supports Ubuntu, Debian, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, etc. And then Red Hat obviously supports their version, but if we were to kind of go down to here, and this becomes really interesting, you will start to see Alpine is marked as experimental, and you will see one of the major differences between those distros is that Alpine runs Muscle for its static libraries, whereas every other distro is running glibc, and so basically the Alpine stack is keeping away from the GNU tools, whereas Debian, Ubuntu, etc. all run glibc. So that is my major issue with that. So if I look at this, and how would I say to my customers, my bosses, etc., I'm going to run you a version of Node.js that is considered as experimental and not a supported version of the release. Probably the last reason, and this is probably the most important reason for me why I don't like using the Alpine image, is there's a typical workflow that almost everyone really follows, which is, and we won't cover it in this video, but we'll cover it in another video, which is you have basically what is considered as a multi-stage build. So what that means is you build on one image, and then you deploy to production with another image. So what I would do is build on the official Node.js image, but deploy on the Alpine image. But as you've just seen there, and then the reason you would build on the official Node.js or another image is that you've got a lot of the tools that you need, right? You're not having to download tar and unzip and all that sort of thing, right? It's already in the distro, and you've got the build tools that you need. But then, as I said, you run it on a different version. So for me, that's a problem, because as a developer, as an architect, I want my builder image and I want my deployment image to be the same. So when I build, I'm not then using a different compiler. I'm not using muscle static linked libraries, right? it should be the same version. So one of my key rules is if I have a builder image and I have a deployment image, then really I want the operating system to be the same. I want the same versions. I don't want different. I may have less packages, but I don't want different versions. If I was just to install the base operating system and none of the packages, etc., what size would that be? And we can kind of just do this. So if I go back to my Docker file, then if I just take away 14.15.3.alpine and instead, what if I actually just download Debian stretch? And we're going to build this image for a second. So let's just do a Docker build. I'm doing it on this one. So I'm going to build this. And this is going to be the simplest image in the world because all that's going to have is Debian stretch. And then we're going to push it to Quay. So it's not going to have my application at this point in time. It's just going to have Debian stretch. Okay. So let's go back to the application just now. We'll do Docker images. So we'll see what the local version size is. We'll scroll to the top. You can see it's 101 meg. And if I was to push that, let's push Docker push. In the previous version, we were running, if you remember, the official Docker image was 346 megabytes. The Alpine version was about 40 megabytes. And then if I just do a refresh on this, you can kind of see the operating system on its own compressed is 43 megabytes. So what have we learned from this? The cost of that image isn't on the base operating system, right? The underlying Debian image is actually very small. The cost is actually in all the various packages that we're actually installing. ImageMagick, Mercurial, Git, things that you could argue that for a production image you don't need. You absolutely need it when you're building on your local machine, but things you don't need if you're building a production image. If we're not wanting to go to the Alpine image, is there a version of Debian stretch that is actually a little bit slimmed down compared to the main images? What we're really looking for is a slimmer distro, and we're looking for a slimmer number of packages. And the answer is yes. There is a version called Debian Stretch Slim. We're going to build that on my screen. So yeah, it's now built that. And then what we're going to do is we will push that image that's built on Slim, and that'll go up to Quay. And then we'll take a look at that in a second. So that's now pushing up to Quay. We'll give that a second and it should be up there. Before we go on to Quay, what we're going to look at is the size of the image on my local machine. And you see I've run Docker images, and you can see that image is now 176 meg, and that's sort of uncompressed. And if I were to go and look at that on Quay, what you can see there is that basically I get a 59.8 megabyte image. Not only does it use a slimmed down distro, it installs much less packages. So all those tools such as Mercurial and Git, etc., they're not present. So the only platform installation packages that are present, as we can see on the model, is things like CA certificates, curl, wget, GNU GP, Dir Manager, xzutils, and libatomic 1. So it's a much smaller installation packages. So you're really getting the base stretch slim distro, and then you're not getting any other tools really installed to install the application runtime. The major reason that those packages are getting installed is you need to download nodejs, and they are the packages that are required to actually download the nodejs 14.15.3. So if you're wanting to run a much smaller image, then use Stretch Slim, and as you can see from my screen, the installation of Stretch Slim that we've installed is not hundreds of megabytes of a difference from the Alpine version. We're talking 15-20 megs. It's really negligible at that point. I get it when you're looking at sort of 346 meg or 700 meg type images, but when you're looking at the difference of 20 meg, I really wouldn't be too concerned about that. What probably worries me a little bit more in the Slim images is that there is obviously still vulnerabilities associated with that package. But again, none of that is coming from the tools that you're installing on the package manager, and we'll go through that in a second. So you can kind of see that there's one high vulnerability in this. So if we scroll on that, you can see it's CVE 2017 AA04, and if I look at that vulnerability, it is classified as high, but if I look at the details, it's you can get this by crafting a UDP packet to port 111, and I'm not going to expose port 111 in my application. So maybe if I don't want to be worried about it, I don't need to be worried about it. But maybe if I have some rules, I don't want to go through vulnerabilities, I just want 0 vulnerabilities, then maybe I want to ignore that. So the Alpine image is more secure than the Slim image. I mean, that's for sure, but it's kind of it's not far off. Now, one of the things that is important there is if we look at the screen. So if I go back to the 14.15.3 image there, you can see there's sort of 3 high vulnerabilities, and I obviously don't have that in the Slim version. So if I was to go to my layers for a second, actually, if I come back to the security scan, and you can see 3 vulnerabilities, and then if I was to kind of scroll down, there's this one is I don't even know what that's relating to. So it's patch and FreeBSD, blah blah blah. I don't know what that is, why that's coming from there. There's one that's in glibc, and then there's one in kind of Linux itself. So yeah, so that image, the official OS image, it's got 3 vulnerabilities. It's got I just, for me, it's not there. The Slim image is kind of cleaner. I tend to use the Red Hat UBI minimal image. It's built off the same source code as Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and you can kind of see it's got no vulnerabilities. And that image size is 71 meg. You can use multi-stage builds to actually even get a slimmer down image by not having to install all of those packages to download nodejs 14. And what you can then do is use a builder image to do the download, and then just copy nodejs into your slimmed down image, and by optimizing the images, we can bring this down to a much smaller image. So the Red Hat image comes down, and actually the Slim image, I managed to bring it down to about 48 megabytes, so which is comparable to the 40 meg. We'll do another video at some point which shows you how you can really optimize your layers of your images, but for just now, as you can kind of see, size isn't really that important here, and it's 20 meg of a difference, 30 meg of a difference. And for me, those are the reasons I don't use the Alpine image. However, if those reasons don't apply to you, if you're not worried about enterprise versions, if you're not worried about support, if you're not worried about the fact that you're building and developing against a different version to what you're going to be deploying to, then kind of go for it. But for me, the fact that I can get the image down to less than 10 meg of a difference, or even 20 meg of a difference, and I can have 0 vulnerabilities, it's not enough of a push to use the Alpine image, in my opinion. And that's only for me. You are free to do whatever you like. Anyway, I hope this has kind of been useful for you, and in follow-up videos we will go into a deeper dive in some of the layers and really look at how you can build your own production image that's really optimized. Thank you.